And we're back for another episode of Life Changing Challengers. As always, I am Brad Minus. I'm your host. And today I am so honored to have Gabrielle Pimstone all the way from Sydney, Australia. So, actually, if you think about it, we're talking to the future,
You are.
right? So, it is April 10th here, and where Gabby is, it's April 11th. So, we are looking into the future, ladies and gentlemen. So, so Gabrielle is an energy coach, and she grew up with numerous degrees in psychology. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to let her tell it. So, Gabrielle, thank you for joining us. I definitely appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Brad. I'm really delighted to be here and thanks for hosting me.
Oh, no, I'm super excited. So, let's just get on with it. And tell us about how you grew up. What was the complement to your family, and what was your childhood like, and where you grew up and the environment?
Great. Well, you think that Australia is exotic, but I actually didn't grow up here. I
Hmm.
grew up somewhere even more exotic. I grew up on the southern tip of Africa in a city called Cape Town, South Africa. Yeah, and Cape Town is a really beautiful kind of seaside town, and I grew up into a wonderful home. Both parents highly academic, two older brothers, and the best older brothers you can wish for. And life was really idyllic for my first 5 years of my life, which are formative years, as we know. But when I was five, I got a really strong sense, an intuitive sense that things were changing and nothing was spoken about, but I picked up on something really big that was happening. And that was that my father had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, my beloved father. And from the age of 5 to 9, I watched him just decline. And he died at when I was 9. He was in his late 40s, and that was a seminal moment in my life, in all of our lives, Brad. And I think the family unit, which was always strong and loving, always remained loving, but things switched, and that was the first experience that I had with serious trauma, like capital T trauma in my life. And things turned on their head in good and not so great ways. I mean, we all know that what trauma does to a person, we develop really limiting beliefs and behaviors. That was definitely prevalent for me. But on a positive note, it got me on a path of searching for answers. And I started really becoming interested in my dreams at a young age, documenting my dreams, journaling, and very interested in the area of psychology, which I landed up studying, and that was the career I moved into. And then also later in life, I got into a little bit of a path, the spiritual path, where I started studying energy and its impact on us. And nowadays, what I do is I bring my background in psychology with my energy skills, and I provide coaching to people who are in need in the way that I was at a young age. So we all go through these big inflection points. They do become defining moments in our lives. And then very often when we are young, like the age I was, it's difficult to process what's happening. And for me, I was a late bloomer. And in my late 40s, at age 50 potentially, I started really reassessing my life and making very different decisions about how I wanted to live it and how I wanted to heal from my childhood trauma. I didn't want it running the show anymore. So that's just a little bit about my background.
Okay, so let's unpack a little bit of that just a
Yeah,
little bit more.
go for it.
So you had mentioned that you lived in the Horn of Africa, and then at age 9, unfortunately, your father passed. Very sorry, and but you had two brothers. So, w- did you move from the Horn of Africa to another place? Is that when you finally found yourself in Australia, or did you stay there
No,
for a while?
I grew up in South Africa. I actually went to
Okay,
school, I went to university, and then
okay.
I left when just after university. I left in my early 20s and came over to Australia. So I'm a fully naturalized Aussie, but Africa is still very much a part of who I am. And my mom and one of my brothers are still there. So yeah, it's
Oh,
still home. Yeah.
nice. Where did you go to school?
I went to school in Cape Town, a private school in Cape Town, South
Okay.
Africa. Yeah.
And you studied, and so over here, well, I would imagine just about everywhere, there's Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, blah, 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 and Masters. So I'm assuming that your first degree was in psychology
Yes, and my second degree. Sorry,
and
I
your second.
misunderstood you when you said school. I thought when we call school
Right.
before university,
Right.
you talking about university. Yes, I went to University of Cape Town in South Africa.
University of Cape Town. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah, that's you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and I know that, and I should have said it. Where did you go versus school versus where did you go to university? And you went to the University of Cape Town. Got your
Yeah,
Bachelor of Science in psychology. Then you got a
yes.
master's in psychology as well. Was there any kind of an emphasis that you had within psychology?
Well, actually, what I decided was I studied clinical psychology, and
Clinical.
then I switched later on in my second degree. I switched to organizational psychology. And that's where I spent 27 years working in huge corporations that were undergoing massive disruption, change, where they were dysfunctional dynamics, bringing teams together, bringing leaders together, coaching people who were also at inflection points in their careers. So it really played out more in the corporate space.
Interesting.
Mm.
So, all right. So I'm glad that you're able to list some of those things that you actually accomplished in that force. So, just so we can get a little background on the journey, what does a day in the life of a corporate psychologist look like?
Never the same. You're in the thick of the politics. Whatever you're
Hmm.
doing, you're working with all the dysfunction, like call it the dark underbelly of the organization. And a lot of it is your days spent in developing individuals and teams. That's what, you're bringing people together, holding up the mirror, helping them to look at their blind spots, and really untangle disruptive and dysfunctional patterns of engaging and behaving. And so that's what it is. So it might be several team and group sessions, it might be working with an executive leadership team who are struggling in one shape or another. I mean, I led big pieces of work, like organizations that were selling off part of their business and acquiring new parts, so mergers and
Hmm.
acquisitions, very unsettling times, really counseling and helping people who were being let go in those scenarios. So there were big pieces of work that I would lead. And then I was also very much drawn to the area of learning, so learning and development. So teaching people how to navigate through change smoothly and with joy and fulfillment as opposed to resisting it, and finding meaning in difficult times, and really giving people a sense of agency back. Because when you're a corporate employee and the organization's got 50,000 people and decisions are being made on behalf of you or for you, my role was to really capacitate people to take back some of their power and make their own decisions and solve their own problems. So it was a combination of working with individuals, with leaders, with whole teams of people constantly, mostly facilitating. Yeah.
It's amazing you say that. And you know what? I don't actually have an episode on myself. So I tend to give certain situations when I can that I have a connection with. And I worked for Tampa General Hospital out here, and I was part of the organizational development team.
That's what
And
I do.
yeah, exactly. I was a project manager, and they gave me a project that was to change the culture of the whole staff, from top to bottom. And we started at the top, which was unusual because the last time they tried this, they started at the bottom with the staff. And we actually
Mm.
started at the top thinking that, hey, you know what? If the top buys into this, then everybody will follow through. Boy, I learned a lot. I learned a
Yeah.
lot. And the things of what you said is decisions being made for you. So I learned a lot about that was in a different project that I was doing at the same time was we were changing the EMR, the electronic medical records system. And
Mm.
I was in with the C-suite and the chief nursing officer when we were talking about the policies and the
Yeah.
procedures. And I was like, hey, this is a great time for us to go in and really get go through and make our procedures more efficient. And if we use the ones that are vanilla
Yeah.
inside of the system that have been proven, because this system had been around for a long time and we're in the major hospitals all over the United States, this might give us a chance. Nothing, not even a hint. She's like, nope, we've been doing this for 30 years. This is the way we're going to do it. They spent an extra $6 million to bring in system analysts to change everything, the coding and everything in the EMR so it will match what we wanted versus
Wow.
us making the thing. Anyway, very interesting what you were saying. So, and it just resonated with me because I just happened to be
Yeah.
there. But
And what you're saying resonates so much with me, if I can just jump in here as well,
yeah,
Brad,
yeah,
because you're talking about trying to change a culture. And that's, I mean, I led those huge, big projects as well.
mhm,
But what I've come to understand, when you're trying to change a culture, it's the same as working with someone who to change their belief systems. It's very difficult. There has to be enough, I guess there's no other way to put it, but disconfirming evidence. People
right,
don't change unless either the status quo is intolerable or there's something really, there's, if they go through the change, their lives are going to be better. And so that's the biggest challenge in organizational change, but also human transformation more generally. That's what I work with. So thankfully, people who typically reach out to me, they are ready for change. But what was in my case, like many people, we continue in our unhappy state until we get like an irrefutable nudge. The universe says to us, you know what, like this, you've got to pivot. In my case, my career started just constricting me more and more. I was deeply depressed and unhappy in 2020. I was in a leadership role at a bank here that was creating such a level of anxiety in my life. I couldn't sleep. My thyroid spiked again. Everything, I started isolating myself from the world. It was a terrible time in my life. And unfortunately, we often wait for the crises to hit before we make change, before we go, all right, enough's enough. That's human nature. But the other thing I've learned is we don't have to wait for the crisis to hit to change. There are two ways we change, either when things get so bad we're forced out of our comfort zone, but sometimes we change through moments of insight when we have an aha moment. And that is enough to get us off the starting blocks and to move in a different direction. So it's difficult changing people when the readiness isn't there.
yeah. And I think they were trying to change. They were hoping that by changing and giving them certain tasks to do
Yeah.
and procedures and policies that would eventually lead to change. So, for instance, we went through this whole exercise where the Franklin Covey had came in and they were going through with the C-suite. Okay, what are your biggest, pain points? And then they got to the point of meetings, of just meetings that were done around the hospital. And they sat down and it took them 2 days to do this. And they quantified the number of meetings
Yeah.
and they put price tags to it, to the number of people that were in the meetings and everything else. And when they came up with the answer, everybody was flabbergasted. So
Right.
literally, we spent $60 million
Wow.
per year in unproductive meetings.
Wow.
So
Wow.
basically,
That's
what they found was it was like, okay, so we had the director, the supervisor, the manager, and the SME all in the same meeting.
right.
No trust.
Yeah. No
Basically, that's what
trust.
it was. No trust. So of
Wow.
course, the CEO said, if there's not an agenda and the agenda doesn't show that there's only one person from the departments that needed to be there, there was no
Yeah.
meeting.
Right.
Yeah. So I ended up having to leave that position, but I was doing some freelance work with the hospital, and I had talked to one of the department heads, and she goes, "Yeah, my meetings didn't decrease; they increased."
What?
Yeah. So she goes, "Yeah, I don't know what happened. Everything went to the wayside, and they just said
Wow.
I just started getting meetings after meetings. Then I was having meetings about the meetings. So
Oh,
I'm
God.
like, yeah, I says, well, I'm glad I'm out of there then. But I can see where you're going with it, and I think that ended up being a pain point. And they're like, okay, that was
Mm.
the right thing to do. We need to solve
Yeah.
this. Let's put a
Yeah.
policy in place, but that's not going to change the behavior.
Yeah.
So interesting enough. So basically, let's go back a minute, and you basically say that you needed that everybody needs that little nudge. They need that pain point. They need that something that's going to finally get them over what I would say the start line
Yes.
in
Yes,
my thing. So
exactly. Yeah.
so what
Yeah.
was so 20 some odd years in corporate psychology? What was your nudge?
Whew. Well, my nudge came during the pandemic. And by
Mm,
the way, I also use getting off the starting block, getting off the starting line. So, like the running metaphor as well, I use that, although I'm not a runner like you. But I was 2020 and I was in this job that was creating excessive anxiety for me.
right. You said the
I
bank,
was
right?
at the bank.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it came at the tail end of, I'd started to feel bored in my career. Boredom turned to I didn't like what I was doing anymore, and that turned into severe anxiety. So it was like a graded an evolution. So over about a 5 year period. And remember, this came off the back of 20 something year career that I loved. And all of a sudden, this work, this job, this career that gave me so much meaning started to create so much pain for me. And I started to see things in the organization, well, experience the dark underbelly of the organization. I was always in it by role and function,
Yeah.
but I started like the corporate politics just started to weigh heavily on me, felt very toxic. Corporate bureaucracy trying to get anything over the starting line, anything signed off, I felt very hamstrung. I felt like, man, I'm not making the kind of impact I want to make. There were so many ramifications from it. And in 2020, I woke up on a Sunday morning and I had this terrible sensation in the pit of my stomach, a feeling of dread, trepidation, terror, just deep anxiety. And I went off for a walk and I listened to a podcast because I love podcasts. And that podcast actually was the catalyst because the woman was talking about her relationship to anxiety. And I've always lived with anxiety, but it was now significantly amplified given the job I was in. And I realized the woman was talking about her daughter had been in a bad car accident years before, had recovered, and was now expecting her first baby. And the woman being interviewed couldn't enjoy the moment because she was so worried that things were now going right, that the rug would get taken out from under her.
Mm,
That was the trauma of her daughter's accident. I had the same syndrome, Brad. I lived for decades after my dad's passing, waiting for the other shoe to fall. And that was the part of her story that really woke me up to this invisible spiritual prison that I'd been living in for decades, which was all about keeping me trapped in a vicious circle of anxiety and loss and grieving and fear. And I was sick of it. So it was on that walk, that podcast made me really go, enough. Now you're going to start making different decisions and you're going to find a way to move through this pattern that's dogged you throughout your whole life. So that was it.
wow. So
Mm.
what was the next step for you?
Well, that was a Sunday. Monday morning, I phoned the employee assistance program to have a chat. I'd never used it before. I phoned them. I said, I want to resign. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling terrible in my job, but I'm scared to resign. And in that conversation, I made the decision to resign, put down the phone, picked up the phone to my boss, and resigned there and then. And I didn't quite leave the corporate world immediately because that would have caused too much anxiety. So, like you, I contracted back. I did some contracting gigs, and that kept me going while I reskilled. And that's when I did a 18-month program to train up as an energy master, like Reiki. And now I've got a new set of skills that I'm using, and I'm I do a little bit of work for corporate, but in a very different way. But a lot of my clients are corporate clients, actually, funnily enough. They come to me because they too are suffering from distress, don't know how to shield themselves from the toxicity. And so my relationship with the corporate world has changed dramatically.
So, okay, so you went to school and got reskilled, and that's great. Was there something that you did in the middle there for yourself? Did you go to therapy? Did you try some of these energy? Did you have an energy coach yourself? Or was it just reskill and you healed yourself by learning?
Such a great question. The process was, as I was learning the skills, he was healing us in the group. So it was a dual process of learning the skills and the tools, but also being healed yourself. 18 months of constantly looking at yourself. No, I didn't go into therapy. I'd been in therapy for much of my life. And it was, in
Oh,
fact, in 2020, I realized like I had incredible self awareness from therapy, incredible self awareness, but my life wasn't changing. And so I needed a different modality. And this gave me a different modality. So I studied under him, and in the process, let go of serious baggage.
so you say him. Do you want, I mean, we don't have to give him a free plug or anything, but it'd be interesting that you seem to be very taken by him and you learned a lot. Well, who is him?
Yeah. So his name is Oliver Nino. He's
Okay.
actually he's based in Colorado, and he is the energy healer to Hollywood. Funnily enough, I
Oh,
didn't know
wow.
this. I didn't know this when I met him, and he's exceptionally gifted. He's a gifted energy practitioner. So I went to one of his free or almost free weekends, and I signed up at the end for the program. So yeah, so he does a lot of talks openly about working with Demi Moore, Gwyneth Paltrow, I don't know, all of those kind of big stars. And that's one side of him. The other side of him is he is on a mission to skill up as many people to take the reins and to start changing lives through energy work, which is fabulous.
Okay. That's yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I think, hey, the
Yeah.
last thing I thought was going to happen on this podcast was to start getting some name dropping, but I'm cool with it. You know,
I
let's
actually
see if
hate
we can.
it.
Oh, well, it's about the clicks, which is a very big anxiety point. I agree. So, can you give us a little more deep dive into the methods of energy practice and what is energy coaching?
Okay. So coaching generally, I mean, you'd know this having worked in
Mhm.
OD, but an ordinary coach has, regardless of their modality or the content, is getting people from A to B. They're moving
Mhm.
people forward in their lives. It's, a process of closing gaps. And it is a process that involves holding up the mirror, a lot of reflective inquiry, and then also teaching people along the way, giving people tools and tips and
Mhm.
pragmatic things to take away. That's the same. I bring that into the energy practice. What I'm doing is I'm teaching people how to. I'm doing a couple of things. I'm going through the regular coaching process, but I'm also throwing in energy healings and energy activations. A healing is done to release stuck energy blocks, and an activation is to unleash untapped potential. We've all got dormant potential at an energetic level in us. So I do that as well. So I'm throwing in that. So I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting for my clients, but I'm also teaching them techniques on how to master their energy, how to understand their energetic state, how to protect their energy from the environment, how to clear their own energy blocks, how to manage and maintain their energy. So when you go into energetic dips, how to get yourself out quickly and how to optimize your energy. There are 5 arms to it. So that's what I'm teaching people. And people enter the process at various points. And depending on who the person is, a lot of the time, I'm helping them, I'm giving them these tools to navigate through change. But there are people who've got more of a spiritual bent that come to me. For example, I've actually got a new client starting tomorrow who feels like she's got a spiritual gift of mediumship that's starting to bubble up. She wants me to activate her spiritual gifts. That's part of the activation process. So I'm going to have to do a lot of clearing and healing. So she's coming from a pure place. And then I'm going to activate her spiritual gifts. So there are different ways that I do it. But what I'm working with is not the physical body as much as the energetic body. We've got a physical body, which we can see, feel, touch, but we've also got an energetic body, which is made up of our aura. A lot of people know about the auras. It's also made up of our chakras. And I'm working at the chakra level to find and then clear the energetic root of our biggest blocks.
Wow.
Does that make any sense?
It makes total sense to me. It makes total
Okay.
sense to me. And I'm gonna plug this episode just for you because I want you to I'd love for you to listen to it. But episode 2 with Joanna Fawcett, she was the woman that I was mentioning to you in our pre-interview, who was married 7 times. She's adamant, basically, that she's a medium, and it's so nonchalant. She calls herself a crone, and which is a Scottish witch that has the ability to pierce what I call it. I actually named this piercing the veil between our world and the shadow world. And this goes also to my belief as far as energy goes, is like when our bodies die, we know in science states that energy cannot be destroyed.
Yes.
But it can be changed.
Transmuted. Yeah.
There you go, transmuted. So that's why I always thought when people say that they've been reincarnated or whatever, or there's ghosts, I'm always like, yeah, because this is a shell. It's a
Yeah.
meat bag. Our energy
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
our soul, our aura,
Yes.
and that's what that is. And that energy could be transmuted and
Correct. And so,
spiritually could be
yes.
reimplanted.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just going with that whole idea that energy doesn't die, it either stays or it transmutes. That's fundamental belief behind working with energy blocks. So what I've come to understand, what Oliver's taught me, is that energy blocks form when we are either in our childhood or even in the womb, and like something traumatic happens in our life. Let's just work with a childhood experience, like my father passing away, as an example. Now, when we are young, we don't have the mental facilities and capacity to process these kinds of traumas. And by the way, what I'm about to tell you, is the same for big traumas as it is for smaller traumas, like, for example, being bullied at school, right?
Okay.
So when we have these experiences, there's an energy. It leaves an energy with us. There's typically, it doesn't just happen. It leaves an energetic stamp in and around us. That energy doesn't go away until we heal. So when we heal, we can transmute the energy. But as children, we often don't do the healing. So the energy sits with us. It starts by getting lodged in our energetic body. And actually, when more and more things happen, it compounds and grows deeper and deeper. It can actually lodge itself in our physical body as well, which is where disease and illness can start growing. But we all have these energetic blocks because we've all had unresolved trauma in our life, and the energy hasn't been transmuted. It's just sitting with us. And so over time, when more things happen and they reinforce the primary wound, this block grows and grows until it becomes almost an invisible handbrake that keeps us really stuck in our life and we don't understand what's going on because it's invisible. So yeah, that's also how energetic blocks form, which is through untransmuted energy.
Interesting. Would you call a block, let's call it fear? Would you
Yes.
think could it develop as a fear?
Yes, definitely. That was my thing. So the loss of my father developed into crippling fear and anxiety. At an energetic level, I was just radiating fear. So yes, that can definitely turn into a block. There's so many different ways blocks can manifest. They can manifest at an emotional level, which is what we're talking about now. They can also manifest as behaviors. So repetitive kind of self-sabotaging behaviors, and they can manifest physically. Like I've worked with people who can't sleep. And the block isn't that they're in insomnia. The insomnia is caused by a particular block that manifests as an inability to sleep, actually a fear of sleeping. And so there are different ways that blocks can play out. But an energy, you've got an energy block, Brad, when you've got like a repetitive thing happening in your life. For example, you find it really difficult to make money. You've got money blocks, yeah? That's an example. Or you may have blocks in relationships to other people, an inability to love and to receive love. I mean, there's so many permutations of this that can form a block in relationships. There are just different permutations, but the golden thread is that you've got this repetitive thing happening, this cycle, this pattern, this theme that you can't work out, and it's just running the show.
Okay. Yeah. So it can basically develop and be transmuted into a bunch of different
Yeah.
negative behaviors and feelings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Limiting beliefs, limiting stories we tell ourselves, behaviors that don't serve us. I can give you an example, I'll give you another example. I'll give you a non anxiety related example, which is my example. But I worked with someone not so long ago who developed a block when they were in their mother's womb. Now, I'll tell you how that happened. And they didn't know when they came to see me, but they were an unplanned pregnancy. Had two older siblings, and their parents were not planning to have a third child, but they were conceived. This person was conceived. Now, one can only assume that their mother had to go through a period of adjustment. There might have been fear, there might have been resistance to this pregnancy. But ultimately, when this person was born, they were born into a loving family. Okay. But they, from that experience of not being wanted, I guess, not being a planned pregnancy, they imbibed their mother's energy from their mother, this block, and it became a block. And the way that they lived out their life was through like codependent relationships in which they were in desperate need of affirmation, of recognition, like an insatiable need to be seen and heard and validated. That's the word. And all of that, what we worked out in our sessions, was that came from the fact that it wasn't a planned pregnancy. And the block started in utero. And it affected this person's thoughts and beliefs, like I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, all of that. Obviously, their behaviors, they were very clingy in relationships. Their identity was totally affected. So it just permeated every aspect of their life. That's how they work.
oh, okay. So, yeah, there's a word for those people that all have those blocks that were unplanned pregnancies. Influencers.
Social media influencers. Look at me. I know.
See, we just figured it out. We should do a study. We should go to the top 2,000 influencers out there and find out how many of them were unplanned pregnancies.
Potentially. I can tell you, I mean, some of that's healthy, like being an influencer is a way of making money, but there is the excess, the what
OnlyFans.
yeah, and that will inevitably come from some form of childhood trauma where the person didn't feel enough, there wasn't enough okayness to go around, and that then translated into what you're describing.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah, I definitely. And then I should hook you up with now. This episode hasn't been released as of right now. It will be the episode that releases right before this one. Her name is Dana Diaz, and she went through a 25-year marriage with a narcissist who was abusive and the whole bit. By the time this airs, everybody already know it because it was in the episode prior to this. But Dana now has an permanent upper respiratory restrictive disease.
Yeah.
And they basically said, now the Western diagnosis is the amount of cortisol that
Yeah.
she was running through her body for 25 years because of the anxiety.
Yes, survival
literally was
mode.
the cause of all this.
Yeah.
So, but in your terms, it actually would have been, it's an energy block,
Well, it's a bit of, I mean, I think it is cortisol. I think there's definitely that
right?
because I sit in both worlds. But
Right.
I think what what I find, I mean, I'm looking at the metaphorical symbolism of what you're telling me. I haven't spoken to this person, don't know
Hmm.
them, but I can imagine if it's an upper respiratory infection, there is some link to finding it difficult to breathe,
Hmm.
feeling constricted,
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah. So
shut
yeah,
up. So that's
and
how
it's
it goes.
a permanent thing. This is not an infection. I
Yeah,
mean, this is
yeah.
it's a permanent upper respiratory restriction. Yeah, because she used to be a cross country coach, and she had to stop. She used to run with the girls, her girls teams and the whole bit, and then she had to stop because she started feeling this way. And then they finally told her, "Says you've been running with so much cortisol for 25 years that this is unfortunately what it causes." And people don't realize that. So this discussion, I mean, for anybody out there that's listening, listen to your bodies, listening to what's going on.
Yes,
When Gabrielle says that there's these energy blocks, when you feel this way, you're feeling like you're stuck. You feel like you're scared. You always have anxiety. There's some energy issues going on. And if
yes,
someone like Gabrielle can help you out to unclog the dam and allow the
yes.
energy to flow, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology, but it
Beautiful.
allow the energy to flow. You might feel better, therefore be able to make the next big move in your life, which is what we talk about here at Life Changing Challengers.
Yes, yes. The work, I thank you for that plug. The work that I do not only makes you feel better temporarily, because I'm working at the inception point, the root of where this block began. I'm actually releasing it. I'm actually, you don't feel it anymore. Now, what happens with the work that I do is I'll work intensively with you, and often the symptoms go and then they may come back, but they don't have the same grip. And then I might just do another session or two, and then it's gone for good. When you work below the level of symptom, when you actually work at the level, the root level, at an energetic level, that inception point where it began in utero, in childhood, wherever it was, during somewhere in that 20-year marriage to a narcissist, where did the roots start? When I go there, find it and I release it, actually it goes away. That's the beauty of
Mm,
this work. And I'm not offering a panacea because I still believe in modern medicine. I think it's hugely, I mean, I grew up with doctors all around me. So, but it's an incredibly powerful complementary modality to complement. If you can't just do this, there are other things that you can do. That's great. So I just think what I offer is a little bit more permanent than the modalities that I was used to. And that's what really attracted me to this, because no one had ever worked on the inception point. I'd spoken about things, but I hadn't actually addressed the energy that was left from those inception points. I cannot implore enough how much of a difference that makes is when you get that root and you release it. It's gone. It's gone for good.
how do you diagnose that?
Well,
The inception point.
I've learned how to, it's a good question. I've learned how to, that's what I spent 18 months learning. And I can read energy. So when I'm working on you, I'm reading you, I'm going through your chakras, I can feel, even if you're not with me, I can feel my hand stops where there's a block. So my hands-on healing gift has activated. So I'll know where to stop. And then I use a variety of other intuitive tools to work out what's going on.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
that. And I will say that, and I know it's a totally different modality than that, but there was a point where I was going to acupuncture, and I went through, and for what I did, I had to do it 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And when I did it 3 times a week, I'm gonna tell you something. I never felt so freaking more good, powerful than I ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
Then obviously went down to 2 times a week, and I still felt it. I still felt good. And then went down to 1 time a week, and all of a sudden it was like gone. And then, of course, but that all became just financial because every time you walked in the doctor's office, and obviously, and at that point, insurance wasn't covering that. Insurance is starting to
Yeah.
see some of this, and we're starting here in the United States where they're starting to
Yeah.
allow well visits, which would include stuff like chiropractic and
Yes.
acupuncture. But I will say that, and I know it's just a different method of releasing and getting the blocks is the acupuncture. But I will
Yeah.
say that, so there is definitely something to it, is what I'm basically trying to say, is that because I remember when I was going 3 times a week, I just felt like I couldn't be stopped, and it was amazing. So there's something to it. This is not a woo woo thing, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is real,
Yes, it
and
is real. And there are hospitals actually in North America. If you go onto their websites, like the Cleveland Clinic,
mm,
let's go and
yeah,
just refresh which one, they offer Reiki.
wow,
Yeah,
a
as a
major hospital like the
compliment.
Cleveland Clinic.
Yes, go onto their websites. They offer Reiki, they offer
I'm gonna look.
alternative, and there are other hospitals that do the same. Some offer acupuncture as well as a complementary modality. So it's part of integrative medicine, which is a growing field because people have really woken up to the fact that our mind and body are interconnected and our psychological challenges manifest physically, and so it's a holistic and integrative way of healing, and more reputable hospitals are offering these kinds of techniques.
Wow. I had no idea. I had no idea because
Mm,
usually,
mm,
like, so right now I work for an orthopedic surgeon,
yeah,
and for him, the Eastern medicine's not, it doesn't really jive. You tell him that, what do you think of chiropractic? And he's like, it's there, it's got its purposes, but you can see in the back
mm,
of his mind, he's like, ain't doing nothing that
yeah,
orthopedics won't do. But I've seen it, and for all the fans out there that are endurance athletes, when I did my first Ironman, it was a village. I saw my PCP every 6 weeks for blood.
yeah,
I saw my chiropractor and my acupuncturist on 1 week, and on the opposite week, I saw my LMT, my licensed
yeah.
massage therapist. And I have to tell you, when you did 1 week of chiropractic and acupuncture, then the next week massage, and then my PCP would run blood tests to make sure that I was getting the right nutrition. It's very intense training. It's 4 days a week. It's double days. It could be 90 minutes to 3 hours broken up. And then on the weekends, it could be anywhere from 4 to 10 hours of training. So it's very intense. So she needed to make sure. But I will say that I don't wouldn't have gone through without that acupuncture. And that's what
Definitely.
really kept me going through. So
Yeah,
as we wind this down, I was wondering if you could tell us. So first of all, let's give a few symptoms of a block, and then maybe if you're able to give somebody like the first thing they can do before they find someone like you, something that they could
yeah,
do to
yeah,
maybe temporarily give them the ability to find a person like you and understand that, okay, this is
yeah,
what I need.
yeah. Okay, so symptoms of blocks, these are great questions, are repetitive patterns in life. Just go back and ask yourself, what are the big themes? What's tripped me up over and over again? So that's your symptom. And that could be one of anything. As I said earlier, it could be an inability to sleep, it could be overeating, it could be inability to make money, relationship dramas, it could be anything, okay? But it's a repetitive pattern. So that's the thing. There are things you can do on your own without the help of an energy coach that can really give you greater control over mastering your energy. And so I'll give you just some. Do you want me to give you a couple of very simple
Yeah.
techniques? Yeah.
I
Okay.
think something that basically what I'm looking for is something that would make them feel like, okay, this is right. I have a block. I need to talk to somebody.
Okay. Well, if you want, then the biggest thing, the biggest gift that I can share is become more intentional with your dreams. Work through your dream state. That's going to give you a really incredible view into the blocks that you have. They are hugely diagnostic. So, what I would say to people is we all dream. Maybe you don't remember your dreams. So, what I can offer is a little ritual that you can go through, that you can practice for 21 days, see what happens. So, just before sleep, just get into a quiet, receptive, open space, maybe have a shower, be by yourself, and just sit on your own and wait for a question to bubble up. Question comes up about some aspect of your life, or you might know what the question is. What I recommend you then do is just before you go to sleep, have a dialogue with your dream and say to your dream, tonight, a dream tonight as I sleep, help me understand why I keep falling out with people. I'm just giving you a fictitious example. Or that's a diagnostic question. You could ask your dream a predictive question. For example, dream, as I go to sleep tonight, please show me what life would be like if I accepted this job or if I moved continents. And then go to sleep, and your dream will respond. Your dreams are actually waiting to speak to you, to be in a dialogue, because it's your unconscious, it's you, it's the unconscious parts of you that haven't yet been explored. Have a dream, go to sleep, and then the minute you wake up, just take notes what came up. If you don't remember a dream in the beginning, first few days or nights, then just when you wake up, write down how you feel when you wake up in the morning. What's the feeling that you've woken up with? Just write it down without thinking too much about it. What's going to happen is in 3 weeks' time, you'll start to remember dreams more, and you'll start to see patterns and themes in your dreams. And I'll say to people, look for, is the same person coming up in your dream? If so, what do they represent? The environment the same? For example, are you dreaming about being in the same house all the time? What does that house represent? What are some of the themes that are coming up from your dreams? And that will give you a clue as to what is blocking you. I think that's the most practical way that I can explain this, because we all dream and we all go to sleep at night.
That is some great advice. And yeah, I'm going to list that like specifically in the show notes, along with Gabrielle's website, which is generativegrowth.com.au. And we'll also give her, she's got a 4-week energy course that we'll link to. So that's going to be cool. And yeah, and then how else could we possibly, could people get in contact with you, Gabrielle?
Well, my website's got multiple ways to get in touch with me, but if you are on Instagram, just hop onto Instagram, DM me, and I will always respond to direct messages. And that's a great way to stay in touch, or just a couple of times a week, I share anecdotes, I share tips, I share tools. So following me might be a good idea as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, so I will also put her Instagram in the show notes for you. So go ahead and go over there and you can click right into her and get in touch with her. So, hey, everybody out there, if you find yourself stuck, you're finding yourself talking, not being able to make the money that you want, maybe you're finding yourself like for the last couple of years, maybe you do great in the morning. And then when you get done with work, you sit on your butt when you know that you've got stuff to do. Those are blocks. So think about all those things that are going on in your life, and then go through this 21-day challenge, dream challenge. And let's see if we can get you to make your next big move, challengers. All right. Gabrielle, thank you so much for joining us. It was an honor and a pleasure and an education. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you so much for hosting this and for being such an incredible host and offering a platform to get voices out there. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I more than appreciate it. So anyway, all right, everybody, listen, this is Brad and Gabrielle, and we will see you in the next one.